Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Germany has been under an increasing pressure to counter Russian hybrid warfare activities, recently giving a boost to its security services and announcing a new drone tech center following a failed UAV attack on a major airport in Leipzig. With Moscow doubling down on asymmetrical threats, can Berlin stand its ground against Russian interference, including the efforts to meddle in German domestic politics? Joining us here today is Sebastian Schäffer, Director of the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you very much.
So do you think Germany will come better equipped to counter these various threats that keep emerging, threats in the hybrid sphere, following the recent announcement of a new drone technology center, but also the ongoing revamp of the state security services, which of course still has to go through Parliament? Nevertheless, the first steps are already being taken.
Yes, I think it's a necessary step, and it will probably pave the way to be some sort of better equipped. We see that Germany's security challenge has changed. There are, as you mentioned, these hybrid threats that are allegedly coming from the Russian Federation. We can find certain proof for this as well. And therefore, it was really necessary to actually not only reform the security services, but also reform responsibilities of the security forces, namely the local police, the federal police, and the German armed forces. This has been done over the past couple of months. Also, this drone technology center that you mentioned is not something that was an immediate reaction to the drone attack on Leipzig airport. It has been planned before, but the urgency became very clear. And this is something that Germany is now trying to keep up with and fight these increasing security hybrid challenges.
Right, so let's talk about these new powers that Germany's services, including the BND, would now have at their disposal. Following World War II, naturally, there was a drive to limit the scope of capabilities and competences that secret services would have. This was, of course, something that was dictated by Germany's history. Nevertheless, right now, the situation is changing. So what would you say is going to be the most important change here? What powers could actually be game changers, perhaps, in this ongoing confrontation of intelligence services?
Well, one of the important things here is certainly to pay respect to the legacy that you have mentioned. So we also need to see that this cannot be misused. And this is what I would see one of the main challenges, to be able to equip security services to counter the hybrid threats and give them more responsibilities, give them more possibilities to use technology and to use counter-espionage. However, at the same time, we also need to see that this is not something that in the future could be then misused. And this is a thin red line that Germany needs to operate on. It's also a thin red line when it comes to the security forces, where there's also a historic legacy, for instance, that the German armed forces are not allowed to operate within the country with very limited possibilities to do so in urgencies like natural disasters. And this is all part of the necessity to change legislation that will increase the powers of security services and intelligence services that at the same time, of course, might raise concerns amongst our allies, our neighbors, but also the general German population.
But when talking about these powers, basically from what we know so far, there is going to be, for example, a capability to employ various cyber security activities, including hacking. So the German services would be able to strike back at the offending websites, for example, take down servers which spread disinformation or which are involved in state-mandated hostile operations against Germany. Do you think that, speaking of the red line that you've mentioned, what if, for example, there is a situation involving the so-called Matryoshka campaign? This was reported recently, that there is foreign interference in German politics, and there is a website clearly operated from outside. It is spreading disinformation. And yet, when there is an attempt to take it down, because it is interfering with the democratic process, certain people or institutions say, no, you cannot do that. This clearly violates the principle of the freedom of speech and constitutional guarantees that we enjoy, and this is illegal. How do you strike the balance here? Because according to recent reports, this Matryoshka campaign, while limited in terms of success, is being operated in order to destabilize the internal political scene.
Yes, so this is really the important and maybe million-dollar question in that case, because as you rightly put, there are already hybrid campaigns like the ones you mentioned ongoing. The point needs to be that here the German state is able to protect itself against foreign but also domestic interference, and this is clearly an attack on the democracy. But to strike the balance here would be, we need stronger powers against these hostile operations. We need stronger controls, but at the same time, it's also, of course, rightly that people are concerned that this might also be misused, that it will be used to spy on the German population, that these hacks can be used also against defenders of democracy. And as you mentioned, one of the major arguments that are out there is, can we actually ban information in even if it is anti-democratic or undermining democracy? Because we would then have to counterweight it with the right to free speech. And I would always say we cannot be tolerant against intolerant people. If we tolerate that, people who actively want to undermine our democracy and democratic principles and values that we stand for, we have to fight back against this. This is necessary to protect democracy, and democracy needs to be vigilant. And this is also one of the cornerstones of the German constitution. It was always one of the cornerstones of the German constitution to be a democracy that has actually tools to fight back. For instance, banning parties that are undermining the democratic and constitutional guaranteed order. When these means of undermining change, we might also have to adapt our means of fighting back. And here, this is the thin red line that we need to pay attention to, that we are equipped to counter these hybrid threats, that we are equipped to fight back, but at the same time also not then pose an internal threat to our democracy. And one last line to it, maybe, I think one of the important things is actually cognitive resilience, to actually not only be able to directly fight back, but also support through education a resilient democracy that is based on vigilant societies that are supporting democratic values.
Now, hybrid warfare, unfortunately, is also happening in the physical domain. We have just learned about a court verdict concerning a case of 3 Ukrainians who were hired, apparently, by Russia to conduct sabotage activities. 2 were acquitted, but one of them was actually convicted of planning arson on German territory. We've also had the failed drone attack, which, by a miracle, basically, didn't cause any damage or casualties. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. Is it safe to say that, unfortunately, we can expect more of these incidents happening on NATO territory, including in countries like Germany?
I'm afraid so. This is something that has really increased. The court case you mentioned refers to a planned attack on delivery routes. Those now, one of them being convicted, planned that tracking devices in parcels and sent them to actually detect routes of those parcels that are also, amongst others, going to Ukraine, and then allegedly planned here explosive devices that could then cause harm and disrupt the delivery of goods on these routes. And here, this is not something new. It happened in 2024. This was also something that happened in Lithuania. This was something that happened in Poland. And I think this is part of this hybrid warfare that the Russian Federation is waging, that we will see an increased usage of these means, because in that case, you can see that the people are recruited. They are not directly linked to the Russian state. It provides plausible deniability that this has been a very singular, individually motivated, planned hybrid attack. And this is really something that we might see as an increase in the future, because it provides to the broader narrative that, on the one hand, the population needs to feel insecure, and on the other hand, also, there's incitement of some sort of state failure. So the state cannot protect us. We need a strong man that can help us. We need someone like Vladimir Putin. This is the narrative, which is, of course, not true, but undermining, again, our values and our societies.
Sebastian Schäffer was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.